I wasn't supposed to be in that part of town. I'd taken a wrong turn coming back from a client meeting, ended up on a street I hadn't driven down in years, and that's when I saw him through the window. My son, my Miguel, down on his knees, scrubbing the baseboards of a restaurant kitchen at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. For a moment, I thought I was mistaken. I pulled over, put the car in park, and just sat there watching through the glass storefront. But it was him. Same build, same way of moving, efficient, methodical, the way I'd taught him to approach any task. He was wearing a stained gray t-shirt and work pants, and there was something about seeing him like that, alone in that fluorescent-lit space, that made my chest physically hurt. Miguel had always been brilliant with his hands. Even as a kid, he could fix anything. Bikes, electronics, plumbing issues I'd been putting off for months. He'd gotten a full scholarship to study engineering, graduated with honors, had job offers from 3 different firms. Then he met Vanessa at a friend's wedding, and everything changed. I'm not going to pretend I understood it at first. Vanessa came from money, real money, the kind that builds wings on hospitals and has family names on university buildings. Her father, Richard Castellanos, owned a chain of luxury hotels across the Southwest. The first time Miguel brought her home, I remember thinking she seemed nice enough, a little quiet maybe, but there was something in the way she looked at our house, our neighborhood, that made me feel like I was being appraised. The wedding was at the Castellanos estate. 200 guests, ice sculptures, a 7-tier cake, and a string quartet. Miguel's side of the family filled maybe 15 seats. I wore the best suit I owned, the one I'd bought for my mother's funeral, and I still felt like I'd shown up to the wrong event. Richard gave a speech about welcoming Miguel into the family, about how love transcends circumstances, and the way he said circumstances made it clear what he meant. After the wedding, things moved fast. Miguel started working for Richard's company, doing facility management for the hotel chain. It sounded impressive when he first told me about it. Director of Property Services. But as months went by and I'd call to check in, I started noticing things. He was always tired, always stressed, always dealing with some crisis that Richard needed handled immediately. "How's work?" I'd ask. "Busy," he'd say. "Dad, Richard, he's teaching me the business from the ground up." From the ground up turned out to be literal. Within a year, Miguel was handling everything from broken AC units to clogged toilets, overseeing cleaning crews, and managing maintenance schedules across 8 properties. The engineering degree sat unused. The job offers from those firms expired, unanswered. I bit my tongue. I wanted to say something, but Vanessa was pregnant with their first child, and Miguel seemed happy enough when I saw him. Or maybe I just wanted to believe he was happy. Maybe I was too afraid of being the difficult parent, the one who couldn't let his son make his own choices, the one who didn't understand that this was what sacrifice looked like when you married into a different world. The first grandchild came. Sophia. Beautiful little girl with Miguel's eyes and Vanessa's delicate features. They moved into a house that Richard bought for them, in a gated community 20 minutes from the Castellanos mansion. It should have felt like a blessing. Instead, it felt like a cage I couldn't name. I started seeing less of Miguel. He was always working, always on call, even at family dinners at Richard's house, these elaborate affairs with hired staff and multiple courses. Miguel would be excusing himself to take calls, to handle emergencies, to fix things. And Richard would smile, that benevolent smile of his, and say things like, "That's my boy, always reliable. Can't teach that kind of work ethic." Vanessa never worked. She didn't need to. She spent her days at the country club, at charity luncheons, at boutique fitness classes. Every few months there'd be another baby. Sophia, then Lucas, then Emma. Miguel looked thinner each time I saw him, more tired, more worn down, but he'd put on that smile and talk about how blessed they were, how grateful he was for the opportunities Richard had given him. The opportunities. That word started to hollow out for me. It all came to a head last Thanksgiving. Richard had invited everyone to his estate, his 3 daughters and their families, his son from his first marriage, and us. The dining room could seat 30 easily. Miguel arrived late, apologizing, explaining that there'd been a plumbing emergency at the downtown property that he'd had to handle personally. "On Thanksgiving?" I asked. "The hotel doesn't close for holidays, Dad," he said, and there was something in his voice. Not defensiveness exactly, but a kind of resignation that made me want to break something. Richard overheard. He laughed, that booming laugh of his, and clapped Miguel on the shoulder. "That's right. Service industry doesn't take holidays. Miguel understands that better than anyone. Hell, the boy's practically got a PhD in plumbing at this point." A few of Richard's relatives chuckled. Vanessa smiled politely, said nothing. Miguel's face did something I'd seen before, that careful blankness he'd learned to wear, that neutral expression that revealed nothing. "Miguel has an engineering degree," I said, my voice coming out harder than I intended. "From State University. Graduated summa cum laude." Richard's smile didn't waver. "Of course he does. Smart as a whip, this one. But you know what? The real education comes from understanding how a business actually operates. All those years of theoretical study can't replace hands-on experience. Miguel's learning the value of every position in this company, from the ground up. That's how you build character. That's how you learn what matters." "What matters?" I repeated slowly. "Absolutely. In this family, we believe in honest work. No job is beneath us. Right, Miguel?" Miguel nodded. "Right." I watched my son agree to his own diminishment and said nothing. Because what could I say? This was his choice. His marriage. His life. I was just the father who'd raised him in a 2-bedroom house with peeling paint, who'd taught him to fix things because we couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it, who'd scrimped and saved to help with college costs even with the scholarship. What did I know about the world Richard lived in? I left early that night, told everyone I wasn't feeling well. Miguel walked me to my car. "Dad, don't what? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm fine. We're fine. This is how it works in families like this. You do your time, you prove yourself, and eventually what, Miguel? Eventually you get to use your degree? Eventually you get to stop being the family handyman?" He looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something crack in that careful mask. "This is my family now. This is what I chose. Can you please just support that?" I did. God help me. I tried. I stopped asking questions. I stopped voicing concerns. I showed up for birthdays and holidays, played with my grandchildren, made polite conversation with the Castellanos clan, and watched my son disappear into a role that seemed designed to break him down into something manageable, something useful, something less than what he could have been. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love knowing where this story is reaching. And if you've ever watched someone you love lose themselves trying to fit into someone else's idea of who they should be, you'll understand why what I found tonight changed everything. That brings us back to tonight. To me, sitting in my car, watching Miguel scrub baseboards in a restaurant at 11:30 on a Tuesday. I got out of the car, walked to the door. It was locked, but I knocked until Miguel looked up. The expression on his face when he saw me, it wasn't surprise. It was shame. Pure, undiluted shame. That's what broke me. He came to unlock the door. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I could ask you the same thing. What happened to the facility management job? He wiped his hands on his pants. This is the facility management job. Richard, he's restructuring, cutting costs. He let go of most of the maintenance staff across the properties. Said it made more sense for me to handle the essential work directly, at least until we can rebuild the budget. You're doing the work of an entire maintenance staff? Across 8 properties? 6 now. He sold 2. Miguel, you have 3 kids. When do you see them? I see them. I make it work. Vanessa, she's been great about everything. Understanding. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. He'd lost weight. There were shadows under his eyes. His hands were raw and cracked from chemicals and hard labor. He was 31 years old and he looked 45. "How much is Richard paying you for this?" "Dad, how much?" $70,000 a year. I felt something go still inside me. 70,000. To do the work of 6 people, while he pays for your house. It's more complicated than that. There's bonuses and... Does Vanessa know you're here? Does she know you're spending your nights scrubbing restaurant floors? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. I could see it in his face. She had no idea. None of them did. Miguel had been disappearing into this work, into this role, and no one in that family had bothered to notice or care. As long as the toilets flushed and the AC worked, and someone was there to handle whatever needed handling, It didn't matter that the person doing it had once dreamed of designing sustainable building systems, of creating something that mattered, of being something more than the help. "Get your things," I said. "What?" "Get your things. You're done for tonight. We're going to have a conversation, and you're going to tell me the truth about what's been happening. All of it. I can't just leave. I have 3 more. Miguel, get your things. Now." Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe he was just tired of pretending everything was fine. But he went back inside, gathered his supplies, left a note for whoever was supposed to be overseeing this work, and got into my car. We drove to a diner I knew, one of those 24-hour places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting for hours. We sat down, and I waited. Just waited. And eventually, it all came out. Richard had been restructuring for the past year. What that meant in practice was finding ways to extract more work from Miguel for less cost. The salary had actually been cut from $90,000. There was no bonus structure. That was just something Miguel told himself to justify it. The house they lived in wasn't a gift. It was technically owned by Richard's company, with the understanding that Miguel was earning equity through his work. There was nothing in writing, no contract, no guarantee. Vanessa, for her part, had no concept of what was actually happening. She saw her father providing for them, saw Miguel working hard, and assumed everything was fine because the bills were paid, and her lifestyle hadn't changed. She had no idea how many hours Miguel was working, what kind of work he was actually doing, because in her world, those details were beneath notice. The breaking point had come 2 weeks ago. Miguel had been at the flagship hotel, dealing with a backed-up sewage line, when Richard had shown up with some potential investors. Miguel had been in work clothes, dirty from the job, and Richard had actually introduced him as our facilities manager, in a tone that made it clear Miguel was staff, not family. One of the investors had asked what kind of background was required for that position, and Richard had laughed and said, "Oh, you don't need much. Just someone willing to get their hands dirty. Miguel here has been doing this kind of work his whole life. It's all he really knows. It's all he really knows." My son, who'd graduated summa cum laude, who'd won the departmental award for innovative design, who'd been offered a position at a firm that specialized in green building technology, reduced to, "It's all he really knows," by a man who'd never had to work for anything in his life. "Why didn't you walk out right then?" I asked. "Because of Sophia and Lucas and Emma. Because we live in a house Richard owns. Because Vanessa. She loves her family, Dad. I can't ask her to choose between them and me. I can't be the reason her kids don't get to see their grandfather. So you're sacrificing yourself instead. I'm doing what needs to be done." "No, you're doing what they've convinced you needs to be done. There's a difference." We sat there in that diner booth until almost 2 a.m, and I told him something I should have said years ago. I told him that I hadn't raised him to be someone's unpaid labor, that I hadn't worked double shifts, and saved every penny for his education, so he could spend his life scrubbing floors in restaurants owned by a man who saw him as nothing more than convenient, exploitable help. That being a good husband and father didn't mean accepting abuse dressed up as family loyalty. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked finally, and he sounded so young, so lost. "You're going to go home. You're going to talk to Vanessa. You're going to tell her everything. The hours, the work, the pay, all of it. And then you're going to tell Richard that things are changing. Either he pays you what your work is actually worth, with a real contract and reasonable hours, or you walk. I can't afford to walk. We have 3 kids, Dad. I have no savings. Everything we have is tied up in a house I don't own, and a life I can't sustain without Richard's support. Then you come home. You move back into my house. It's paid off. There's room. You take whatever job you can get while you find something better. You rebuild. You remember who you are and what you're actually capable of. And Vanessa? If Vanessa loves you, really loves you, not the version of you that's useful to her father, she'll choose you. She'll walk away from that world and build something real with you. And if she doesn't? I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. Miguel went home that night. I don't know what he said to Vanessa, but I got a call the next morning. It was brief. I told her. We talked all night. She's angry. Her parents are furious. But I did it. 3 days later, he did something I didn't expect. He called a family meeting at Richard's house. Insisted I be there. When we all gathered in that massive living room, Richard and his wife, Vanessa looking pale and anxious, the other daughters hovering nearby. Miguel stood up and addressed them all. He laid it out simply. The hours he'd been working, the pay he'd been receiving, the promises that had never been kept, the equity in the house that didn't actually exist. He presented it all like the engineer he'd trained to be, with data and facts and no room for emotional manipulation. Richard tried to laugh it off at first. "Come on, Miguel. You're part of the family. We don't need contracts between family. You know I've always taken care of you. You've taken advantage of me," Miguel said quietly. "And I let you because I was afraid of losing Vanessa and the kids. But I can't do this anymore. I can't teach my children that this is what love looks like. Someone working themselves to death, while being told they should be grateful for the opportunity. So what do you want?" Richard's voice had gone cold. "Either you hire me properly, market rate for the work I'm actually doing, written contract, reasonable hours, real benefits, or I quit. Today. And the house. We'll move out. Figure something else out." Richard looked at Vanessa. "Are you going to let him do this? Walk away from everything we've provided? And this is the part that still gets me. Vanessa, who I'd written off as oblivious, who I'd assumed would choose comfort over everything else, looked at her father and said, 'He's not walking away. You're pushing him out.' I've been blind to it, but Miguel's right. This isn't how family treats each other." Richard's face did something complicated. For a moment, I thought he might explode, throw them out, cut them off completely. Instead, he did what powerful men often do when they realize they've miscalculated. He recalibrated. "Fine. If that's what you need, we'll make it official. Draw up a proper contract. I'll have my lawyer handle it." Miguel shook his head. "I don't want your lawyer handling it. I want an independent employment attorney to review whatever you propose. And I want everything we've discussed in writing before I work another day." It took 2 weeks to work out the details. In the end, Miguel got a real contract. Salary commensurate with what 3 facility managers would make. 40-hour work weeks with overtime pay, benefits, and a clear path to equity in the house. Richard also agreed to hire actual maintenance staff, with Miguel overseeing them rather than doing all the work himself. But here's what really changed. Miguel started taking calls from those firms that had tried to hire him years ago, started updating his portfolio, started remembering what he'd actually wanted to do with his life. The job with Richard became exactly what it should have been from the start, a temporary position while he rebuilt his career on his own terms. 6 months later, Miguel accepted an offer from a sustainable design firm in the city. He's working on projects that actually matter to him, getting home in time for dinner most nights, and teaching his kids that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remember your worth. Vanessa's relationship with her father is different now. More honest. Less comfortable, maybe, but real in a way it never was before. She's actually started taking some business courses, talking about starting her own consulting firm. Turns out being married to someone who expects you to be a partner rather than an ornament changes you. As for Richard, he calls less frequently. The family gatherings are smaller now, less performative. He and Miguel have an arrangement that's professional rather than personal, which seems to suit everyone fine. I don't think Richard will ever really understand what he did wrong. Men like that rarely do. But he learned, at least, that not everyone will accept being diminished for the privilege of proximity to his world. I see Miguel every Sunday now. We've started this tradition of working on projects together in my garage, fixing things, building things, just spending time together the way we did when he was a kid. Last week, he told me that Sophia asked him what he does for work, and he got to tell her about the school he's helping design, this beautiful, sustainable building that will serve kids for generations. "She was so proud, Dad," he said. "She kept telling everyone at school that her dad is an engineer." That's when I knew it had been worth it. Not the confrontation, not the risk, not any of that. But the moment my son got to be proud of himself again, got to show his children what it looks like to value your own worth, even when others try to convince you you're only as valuable as your usefulness to them. I still think about that night sometimes. Seeing him through that window, scrubbing baseboards. I think about how close we came to him just accepting that as his life, as his fate. How close his kids came to learning that lesson, that you should make yourself small and useful and grateful, that you should swallow your dreams for the comfort of people who will never see you as their equal. But we didn't let that happen. And now Miguel is teaching his children something different. He's teaching them that sometimes love means boundaries. That family shouldn't require you to destroy yourself to prove your loyalty. That there's dignity in hard work, but there's no dignity in letting others exploit that work while pretending it's for your own good. I'm not going to pretend it's all perfect now. Vanessa and Miguel still have hard conversations sometimes about what was lost, what was learned, what needs to be different. Money is tighter than it was. They moved to a smaller house that they actually own, but Miguel comes home to a life he chose, rather than one that was chosen for him. And that, I've learned, is worth more than any mansion, any connection, any promise of security that comes with the price tag of your self-respect. The last time I saw Richard was at Emma's birthday party. He was cordial, even friendly in a distant way. As we were leaving, he pulled me aside and said, "You raised a stubborn son." "I raised a son who knows his worth," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't tell if he understood or if he was just adding this to his list of things that didn't make sense to him, things that existed outside his worldview where money and power should always be enough to secure loyalty and gratitude. I don't need him to understand. I just need my son to remember that he's not just anything, not just useful, not just convenient, not just someone who should be grateful for scraps from a table he helped build. He's an engineer. He's a father. He's a man who learned just in time that the hands that build your life should be your own.